Well, we're going to talk later about some figures, even well-known figures within evangelical Christianity that have been connected to Dominionism. Sometimes they don't like that term, but they really stand for the principles.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure many of them would be extremely embarrassed to have people know that there is a connection to Gnosticism that really explains the overarching principles.
I would
of
bet
it.
they haven't even bothered to, to consider those sort of connections.
Of course, they may think the same thing as Dulles and say that Christians don't read either.
Yeah.
And,
No.
It may be true.
Heaven forbid that unfortunately may be true. So so basically it's like you say, an anthropocentric or man-centered belief system that it relies on us. And in fact, it can be rationalized as being very, very virtuous, that we have a sense and a call and a duty to bring these things about, and people can take Bible verses and things like that and try to put together a theology to justify the requirement for our striving to bring about the kingdom of heaven here on earth. And I would tend to think that there are earlier embodiments, not only just within evangelicals who I pick on, even within Catholicism and other groups, that this would have some relationship to things like amillennialism and other things like that, whether it's the church universal and triumphant or individuals, one way or the other, trying to bring the kingdom of God here on earth, either to run it ourselves or to hand the keys over to Jesus when he shows up.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, again, like I said earlier on, you find this kind of stream of thought in all of the Abrahamic faiths. I mean, with the Judaism, unfortunately, you had the Sabbateans, who and one of the Sabbatean sects known as the Frankists, who were followers of Jakob Frank, who basically said the Messiah is not coming back until we take upon ourselves some kind of activism, and we either make the world completely saintly or completely corrupt, one or the two. But that's the only way that we'll see the Messiah return. And as a result, we see this subversion on the part of this particular sect of Judaism, and a lot of intersections between them and the Jacobins, who were Illuminist bred, and who basically were the more violent sect of the revolutionaries, the most violent sect of revolutionaries in France. And so we have that same kind of trend throughout history, and when you have that kind of pattern over and over again, it's suggestive that there has been basically a plan, a script followed by the power elite to turn religions to empty of them of all their substance and to make them vehicles for an economic or a social or political or all three agenda of some sort.
Well, it's very interesting when you use this comparison of talking about the Enlightenment and the role of the Jacobins in the French Revolution, in being basically an expression of Dominionism in that context, and it makes me really pause when I think about well-meaning evangelical Christians who've been pulled into Dominionism and what will happen then. Because of Jacobinism and what happened in the French Revolution is any pattern for the future, what little I know in my studies of that revolution, I see a pattern that's the most clear-cut of what we see as the last days Antichrist reign that I know of any historical, because when you look at just the few things, the major things we know in our history books, they changed the times and the seasons. They tried to take religious context out of any kind of holiday celebration. They changed the calendars. They even changed the days of the week.
It sounds very much almost like the Pharisees.
They
that
killed.
Sounds like you could be describing the Pharisees.
They killed the religious leaders. They hauled them out, killed them first. They set up their own god that they can control. I believe her name was Liberty? Was that the goddess Liberty?
I think it was Athena.
Okay, but they would refer to her by various names like Liberty, but basically it was that embodiment. So they did all these things that we see are prophesied of the last days world government. And it was done under the Jacobins, under this reign of Dominionism, of which some of our religious people may be unwittingly assisting them with.
Well, if you look back to the anarchist Prince Kropotkin back in 1908, he said that the French Revolution was the source and origin of all the communist, anarchist, and socialist conceptions, and that what modern socialism and what the revolutionary movement of the modern time had done was just systematize those ideas and found arguments in their favor. And if you look at Goebbels, the infamous Nazi, he praised the French Revolution, and Hitler saw the Nazi revolt as, in his own words, the counterpart of the French Revolution. So,
wow.
I mean, that was the model established for that's been followed and recycled again and again right up to the present day with our power elite. That's exactly the same model that they follow.
Essentially, all that Dominionism is it's a Jacobinism given a theistic gloss. And interestingly enough, many Dominionists have aligned themselves with none other than the neoconservatives, who several individuals have identified as direct ideological heirs of the Jacobins. There is an excellent book by Kleist G. Rintz called America the Virtuous, where he basically shows the parallels between neoconservatism and Jacobinism. And of course, Lawrence Wilkerson, who helped, I believe it was Colin Powell, assemble the highly politicized dossier on Iraq, later on said, when he was asked about the neoconservatives, he said, well, they're not conservatives. They're not new conservatives. They're basically Jacobins. They're
the inheritors of Maximilien Robespierre's tradition.
Yeah, and so essentially when the Dominionists aligned themselves with individuals like the neoconservatives, then they are basically marrying Christianity to the Enlightenment tradition, and to the violent revolutionary wing of the Enlightenment, Jacobinism.
Now, wasn't this alluded to? Not completely, and in fact, I haven't read the book yet. I just got it, "Fire in the Hearts of Men" by our current.
You got that?
I got it from our current.
Oh, you better read it quick, because I want to read it.
Our current Librarian of Congress, who actually alludes to these, well, he calls them occult societies in Western Europe that actually formed the foundation alongside the Enlightenment of even the founding of our country. But he admits these very, very same things in the book, and it's very interesting that a lot of his phraseology is quoted verbatim in speeches by George W. Bush.
Absolutely,
exactly. "Fire in the Minds of Men" by James Billington. And we've heard the president actually use the term "fire in the minds of men." Not that he himself probably knows what that means. I see him by and large as merely a figurehead, and that's the way it works in the deep political world. Is that presidents and heads of states are really nothing more than branch managers, and it's somebody else that's basically guiding things behind the scenes.
The handlers take it, and that's not just a dish against Bush. That's true for most of the presidents, correct?
Right. Absolutely.
Right. Right.
But he used the term "fire in the minds of men," and I don't think he knows or can appreciate what that.
Which is a conspicuous allusion to Dostoevsky's what Dostoevsky calls the revolutionary faith of the socialist revolutionaries of that time, and that's essentially what you see being mobilized through the Bush administration, through this presidency. You see kind of this radical, violent socialist revolutionary movement under the guise of the
neoconservative.
Yeah, the neoconservative.
Now,
don't they call it spreading democracy? Isn't that the term?
The global democratic revolution, which is essentially just Trotsky's Fourth International.
And most people don't recognize this because they have come to see a lot of the neoconservative movers and shakers as anti-communist, but it would be wrong to characterize them as anti-communist. They're more properly anti-Stalinist. Is what they. I mean, they were Trotskyist, who basically thought that the Soviet Union was abandoning the cause of communism, and so so the Cold War became for them basically a love spat between the Trotskyites and the Stalin and the Stalinist variety of communism.
Wow. Well, I want to move on to another topic. Our time's getting away, but I want to talk about something that gets closer to some of your other core writings that you've done, and that's defining some additional terms for our listeners to chew on. They certainly had not nearly enough deep topics or concepts already, so we'll lay some more on them.
Enough softball, guys.
Yeah. the concepts of scientism and technocracy. Can you explain what they are and how they relate to these movements, and how does it handle concepts like human liberty and dignity?
Sure. Well, basically, scientism is the fetishization of science. It holds that science should be ecumenically imposed upon all fields of inquiry. And while the modern mind, chronocentric as it is, might consider such an imposition desirable, the truth of the matter is that science as a system of quantification, because that's fundamentally what it is, it deals predominantly with systems of measurement. As a system of quantification, it can only concern itself with quantifiable entities. Thus, whatever cannot be quantified must be jettisoned, must be precluded from purely scientific considerations. And that means that concepts such as human liberty, dignity, the sanctity of life, and of course God, a transcendent spiritual reality, all these things must be jettisoned. Now, scientism, one of the areas that scientism holds should see the ecumenical imposition of science upon is none other than the areas of political science and governance. And when you basically have the scientifically arranged state, which Aldous Huxley called the scientific dictatorship, basically what you have is a technocracy, and a technocracy is a rule by a cognitive elite, a rule by those who rule by virtue of their specialized knowledge, policy professionals, individuals who simply have the cognitive capacity that you and I and all the other vulgar, unwashed commoners do not have. And so they, by virtue of their specialized knowledge, must rule. Now,
wait a second. I have a PhD in science. Could I be one of the ruling elite, or am I stuck down with the rest of the unwashed?
Just so long as you do not deviate from the status quo, just so long as you subscribe to whatever all the other so-called specialists and policy professionals subscribe to. If you had a problem, for instance, with, say, evolution, well, you couldn't take part in this government because they view evolution on an ecumenical level, on a universal level. They view all forms of governance as a corresponding political evolution to our alleged biological evolution. And if you subscribe to certain other scientific paradigms that make room, say, for a certain theistic worldview, say Christianity, well, evidently you probably wouldn't have much of a place because in this sort of government, because you're deviating from the status quo, the scientific status quo.
So even though they are science background, they may revere in words the scientific method, but they also revere even more so political correctness in their own paradigm. And even though I may say they don't have all of the data to take something from a hypothesis to theory to law, they add the political component to it where they move directly to the law and squash any kind of dissenting scientific approach, which is actually counter to the classic scientific method.
Absolutely. That is absolutely true. And as a result, you have kind of this tyranny of institutionally accredited science, and it becomes kind of its own theocracy because scientists merely become priests who don lab coats and act as the chief expositors of miracles, signs, and wonders, a la test tubes and beakers. And the scientific jargon of the day becomes an esoteric vernacular that is
basically chanted off almost like hymns and like vespers. And all the rest of the unwashed, vulgar masses just cannot apprehend these things, and so they must be kept low. They must be governed, and that's essentially what technocracy is, and that was what the Enlightenment was attempting to achieve, was a technocratic form of governance or scientific dictatorship.
Was the whole idea of the bureaucracy part of the outgrowth of technocracy?
Absolutely.